What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Perspectives Podcast. This is Chase here. Hope everything is going well. Hope y'all are having a great Friday so far and a great May, into the spring, start to the summer, all that fun stuff. So we're coming at you today in a little bit of a different format. As you could probably see from the title of this and in the description, some of this is going to be voice memo based, and we're going to see just kind of how this goes and have some fun with it. So the question that we're kind of sitting with today is, should churches be run like a business, and should churches brand themselves? This is a question that a few of us have been sitting with and asking just in our friend group, and we've had a number of different perspectives on it. And so what we've decided to do is have some of them send in some voice memos to share just a little bit of their perspective and thoughts on it. Josue and I were traveling around a little bit over this last week and couldn't get together, so he sent in a voice memo as well. Reason why, he's not here right now with his normal grand intro. But yeah, so we're going to be basically putting in those voice memos in this part right here to allow people to kind of share their perspective, for y'all to be able to hear them and gain wisdom from them. And then I'm going to come back around at the end to kind of share my thoughts on it. So without further ado, here is Josue and all of our friends.
I would say I don't really have an issue with churches marketing and branding themselves. And I'll explain that a little bit more. Obviously, we're not to be ran like corporate America. It's just a different entity altogether. But I don't think business always has to be necessarily be a bad thing, right? Obviously, I think more so when I think about churches being ran like a business, I'm thinking structure, right? The word that comes to mind is structure. Should churches have structure? Yes. Should churches have a vision? Sure. Like, yeah, this is what we want to do. This is what the Lord has placed on our heart. We want to, it doesn't have to be nothing too crazy, but yeah, churches should have a vision, for what they're wanting to do. Finances, of course, as people are giving to the church because they're believing that they're giving to the work of the ministry, we need people to be faithful and to steward those finances very, very well. There needs to be structure, right? There needs to be order in the church so the needs of the people are met, right? So if we just come in, there's no structure at all, and all we do is just pray and read, which are great things. We need to do those things, but we're not meeting the needs of our members because we don't know how to steward our finances, and we're not being faithful with those things. Then I think we're doing ourselves a disservice, right? Structures from God, right? Paul said, "Let everything be done in order." Like there has to be an order to the way that we do things. So maybe if the word business sounds a little too aggressive, I understand that, but churches need to have structure. Structure is very important. We don't want to just do something that lacks structure, lacks vision. The Bible says that people perish without vision, right? So vision has to be an important thing. Vision could be as simple as we want to see our community change, to know the love of God, to be transformed, to be renewed, to make disciples. Like those things are vision. That's not evil. That's not bad, right? Business just take structure from kingdom stuff, right? So these are all kingdom principles to begin with. So yes, I believe that churches need, not should, they need structure. They need vision. They need structure in finances, structure in how we're going to disciple people and make sure that the people's needs are being met. I think about those widows in the book of Acts, and they picked 72 people that were faithful, filled with the Spirit, and all of that, so they could go meet the needs of those widows. What's that? That's structure. So that's very, very important. So yes, churches need structure. Maybe I don't know if even marketing, I don't know if that's bad. If you post about your church, inviting people on social media, that in of itself is branding and marketing. Is that evil? No. Like, why is that bad? So yes, I definitely agree and feel that churches need structure. I mean, to market and share about what the church is doing, utilizing the things that we have and share the good use. I think those things are important.
I think the question in regards to should churches brand and market themselves, I think it goes into defining branding and defining marketing. As marketing, obviously, it's a pretty broad term, and so I would say that if the church, in context, is marketing themselves within the scope of just sharing with the world that they are there, that they are open, that they are available, that they are willing, um, that they are a resource, meaning they are marketing the vision and the mission and the heart that God has given us, then I think that goes into the original first century church. Christ gave us the commission to go and market and actually go and share and to go and communicate and to go and tell others, and that is marketing in itself. You could even fall that into the advertisement aspect of marketing. Um, and then in regards to branding, it's kind of on that educative aspect of business when we want to brand, we want to literally sear a message, a mission, a vision, a scope of how and the culture of something, an organization, a person, a personality into somebody's mind. And so the aspect of branding, it depends on what you're branding. Should a church brand themselves? Well, I believe that the church should brand the world with the message that Christ has given us. But I think where the conversation that we had gets a little blurry is, are they branding Christ's mission, Christ's vision, that is a universal church message, meaning across any church, any denomination, or are you branding yourself as we are the church as that essentially does X, or we are the church that does better this than essentially communicating than others. Even if you're not saying you're doing it better than others, you're essentially communicating yourself just like a clothing company communicates. You're not saying that other clothes suck, but you're essentially branding yourself as the brand that does this because others don't. And I don't think the church should do that. I don't think the church should brand themselves in the scope of saying, we are the church that does the following, communicating that the other churches aren't, essentially. We should be communicating a universal message that should brand itself universally across the world, that the church is X. And so no matter what church they walk into, there's a consistent message. Just like when you walk into one Chick-fil-A or one Apple store, it's a consistent brand that you walk into. That should be the case for every church, not a certain denomination or even a certain church building organization that has branded themselves as X or Y. And so I think that would be really the heart of branding and marketing. Should a business operate as a business? I think fiduciary wise, I think scripturally, there is a sense of understanding the costs, understanding the expenses, understanding the stewardship aspect of running an organization. And God calls us as stewards to be good stewards, and that is understanding expenses. And so if we have processes and systems, even in the 21st century, to steward those resources, even the people, the finances, the programs, everything, to essentially keep an understanding of a clear vision of how we're stewarding everything, then I think absolutely. But if you are stewarding a church in a business mindset in regards to how you're growing, meaning you're stewarding the growth of a church from a business, analytical, worldly perspective, meaning growth in your eyes is how the world defines a business to grow, which is how much are we receiving in donations, how many people are getting saved. Everything is linear in measurement versus how faithful are we doing the job that we have been called to do, how consistently are we doing it, how integrally are we doing it versus how quantitatively. And so I think in light of business operations, I think yes, you should steward a church operationally speaking like a business is operated, meaning with good stewardship principles, but you should not steward it quantitatively speaking, but qualitatively speaking, meaning you are out to provide a quality view of what the church is supposed to look like.
So since I obviously have done church marketing and ministry marketing, uh, my answer is both. And the reason is, I believe strongly, Sermon on the Mount, like there was no marketing, thousands of people, no marketing, because that's just who Jesus was. But I also believe that our brand is not just like logo and colorway, that it's the way we live our lives. And I think Jesus' brand was that of miracle worker while he walked on the earth to those who didn't know him. I do believe there's a way to conduct church marketing, business marketing, that is pleasing to the Father. I know that my heart posture when going in is, God, what would please you, and how can we be the best stewards of this? And a lot of times he speaks and gives wisdom and gives direction, and I feel like if he didn't want us doing those things, he wouldn't. And I think if the whole goal is to trump every other church and to be the best, I think that's something weird and not necessary. But I do think that it's more so a heart posture thing and not so much the behavior thing. What is the heart posture of why you are doing what you are doing? Is it to please the Lord? Is it to honor the Lord? Is it so that we can steward people well, so we can disciple better, so that we can make it easier for people to understand that Jesus is the only way? Like, what is the reason? Or is it just to get people to church, to fill a seat, to get more money, to get more people? Like, I think the heart posture of it matters. So that's my answer. I don't know if that actually answered it fully. I think so. I was just having this conversation with Erica. So I have a fan going because it's hot in my house. We need the AC to get fixed. I was talking to Erica about practicals because I don't necessarily love that word, because spiritual things are the most practical things that I believe we can do. But a lot of times when we use practicals, it's like to negate the spiritual. And so I think Jesus was pretty practical. He had Judas as a treasurer, and that whole give to Caesar what is Caesar's. So there are a lot of natural things that they still did in order to keep their ministry going. Jesus did whatever God said to do, the most practical thing to do. So I think within a church structure, that's the same thought, is most practical thing is to do the spiritual things first before all the other things. And from that, God will give you natural directives, but it should come from that place of seeking him, seeking his heart. And so those are my thoughts. Is I believe churches should have practicals. I believe churches can have vision statements, culture, all the things. Obviously, I go to Mercy Culture, but I believe that because I believe that it has to come from spirit first, that it should be top down and not so much we just want to have something to give people, because I've also seen that. And I think that it's about heart posture.
So I hope you really enjoyed their thoughts on it. That was able to encourage you, provoke things in you, grow your perspective, hence the name of the podcast, and all that other stuff. So going to my thoughts on the question, I want to say two things off the top. First, I agree with pretty much everything that everyone had to say on those voice memos, and their conversations about the heart of things, the motive of things, and then all that. And I do think one thing I want to also note is, like, there is a difference between churches and nonprofits in my mind, where churches, like, both are done to the glory of the Lord, but churches are a purely house of worship, whereas nonprofits are a little bit more in that typical business side of things. And I think if we start to tell a nonprofit that they can't brand themselves, they can't be ran like a business, then we might as well tell for-profits that they can't really do that. As long as things are pure, as long as the heart is in the right direction, it's fine to do that. But churches, I think it's a little bit different. But going from there, I do think there is one key thing to note that a lot of people miss from, like, a technical side of things, is whenever we're talking about churches being ran like a business, is the way that our government has set up our economy. Like, there's no way for a church to avoid being set up like a business. They're required to keep financials and all of that, or else they would be shut down as a organization. It would be illegal if they didn't have any business side to them. So I do think a lot of people have this idealistic or idealized, whatever the word is, vision of a church where it's just people coming together, kind of tossing in money and for their tithe, and just wherever the money needs to go to help whoever, like it just kind of happens, and there's a flow to it. There's no structure, there's no order, and while that is a cool image out there, like it's not really something that we can do in our current society. Other societies may be able to do that in a little bit more informal way. Maybe if you have a house church that isn't set up as an actual organization and the members don't want to use their tithes as a tax write-off, like, okay, like you'll be able to do that. But a lot of the churches that we go to now, who are set up as a nonprofit organization, and the members write off their tithes, like it's not able to do that just because of how the economy is set up. And so I want us to kind of remember that, whenever we're thinking about this question, whenever we're talking about this question, is churches have a requirement on them. They have rules and regulations, that the government has for them. And so as much as we'd want them to do away with their finance or accounting teams and not even think about money, like they have to think about it in terms of at least, counting what's coming in and counting what's going out. But from there, I am glad that we asked this question, about business and branding rather than just business, because I think like people have concerns, like rightly, about the priorities of a church if it's a business. But I think more so like this whole branding thing. Like, yes, from a business side, if we focus on so much on bringing in money, like that's an issue. If we focus like so much on money to where we cut outreaches and cut these expenses because we need more money to pay this person or pay this, or to make us feel comfortable to keep this amount of money in our bank account, like, yes, that's an issue. If we water down our messages to keep people at church, so that we can keep the tithes and money rolling in, that's an issue. If we're really bold in our messages to keep people at the church, to keep the tithes coming in, like that's an issue. Like if we're doing things purely to preserve money rather than trusting the Lord, like, yeah, that's an issue. But at least for me, but I feel like others as well with the conversations I've had over the last few weeks, I feel like this next part almost hits like at the core of what a lot of people mean whenever they say like this church shouldn't be ran like a business. And what it is like when we create a brand as a church, what this creates room to do is elevate the values of the brand over the values of the kingdom. And that's the biggest thing, is I think we see that churches are creating these identities, creating these brands that they're more loyal to than their loyalty to the kingdom. And oftentimes, like, the values of the brand and the values of the kingdom are aligned, but it creates and makes this like slippery slope, to where we can get to the point where we really focus on some parts of the values and almost excuse or do away with other parts. And what we begin to do is unify around the brand, those unique values, and something other than Jesus, and holistically Jesus and everything that he's said. And I feel like and I don't think it was just unique in the DFW area, but in 2020, I feel like we saw a lot of people, at least I observed a lot of like this becoming more prominent, or me just recognizing more, I don't know. But, a lot of people moved churches that year, mainly because they didn't see certain values at their current church that they wanted to see. And they went to another church because they saw those values. But what it can create and what it has created at times is a church and a gathering more so around those ideas rather than gathering around Jesus, gathering around truth and boldness, like, or justice and inclusivity, rather than holistically around Jesus. And frankly, for me, like to open up about me, that was kind of my story. In a way, was I was at a church at that time, and the response that I saw from the leadership was one I felt of like compromise, was one of just catering to the crowd, catering to the mob, rather than let's go through this in a discerning way. Let's think about this. Let's not have a rash reaction. And let's do what is righteous, and let's do what is merciful. Let's do what is caring to people. And from there, me and, a good number of my other friends like left the church and then went to another church in town, because we saw, the boldness that we wanted. We saw this standing up for truth that we wanted. We saw this leadership and consistency that we wanted. But what's happened potentially there is like a lot of the people who are at that church right now came in 2020 mainly because of those values that they saw, that the church didn't shut down, that they're loud and vocal about social issues and things like that. But at least for me, what what the Lord has kind of shown me, that there's a danger in this, and just something that we all need to be cautious about and careful of is that we don't become more loyal to those values that attracted us to that church, to where we excuse some things, and that we stay committed to the kingdom. Like it's been something that I was very grateful for, because I do think for me that I was close to getting to that point where I was excusing certain behaviors or other things because there was these things that I just really, really wanted. And I was thankful that before, I was, before I didn't forget to think about that stuff, that the Lord brought that to mind, that I've been able to like stay grounded in that and continue to help myself, help people, just bring those conversations to mind. And so kind of in summary, I think it's always bad for a church to have a name, brand themselves, give themselves a unique identity. Like, no, I don't. But we just need to be discerning that upholding the brand of the church doesn't become more paramount than loyalty to the kingdom and kingdom values. That sometimes, we'll disagree with leadership or friends or things like that, but what that does is create room for conversation. There should never be 100% agreement in every single person at a church. That's not what unity looks like. And I think if that's the case, then something that we really need to ask ourselves is, am I thinking for myself at this point? Am I letting the Spirit lead me? Is this faith my own, or am I just sort of following the crowd in a way? Do I have a faith of my own, or am I just following the crowd? And so with all this, I hope this can be encouraging, thought-provoking, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, email or phone number if you have it. We will be launching our social media back sometime here over these next couple weeks. So y'all will be able to start interacting with us over Instagram again. But yeah, y'all, we appreciate y'all tuning in. Until next time, much love. God bless.